Well, hello, that's me again. Today is the September 13th. It is Wednesday, and let's not put things away into the long box, so to speak. And let's start with the issue of the attack on Sevastopol, which happened yesterday. Evidently, what Russian Defense Ministry reports, and they are usually very diligent and very truthful in this respect. So it's the fact that one of the amphibious ships have been slightly damaged, and maybe some damage to one of the subs in the Ordzhonikidze ship repairing yard. So, and it was already stated unequivocally that they will be back very soon. The damage is not significant and will be repaired. So, but this is kind of almost daily, well, weekly for sure, occurrence with Sevastopol, and it will continue, and Russians will play the game of the air defense, reshuffling air defense. And now I want to answer to also to some trolls, and many of them are just basically losers who constantly come up with the, oh, what's the deal with this, Russian pilot of Mi-17 helicopter? It's a transport helicopter. It could be armed with the unguided rockets, and you have machine guns in the doors there. But he ran away with the helicopter and with the two crew members who never knew what they were getting themselves into, and they were killed, obviously, naturally, by the Ukrainians. So he ran with his helicopter, and people say, well, what's the big deal? Well, it is big deal in terms of propaganda issue, but in terms of any kind of effect or impact on combat readiness or prosecution of the war, it will have negligible, if zero, impact. And again, if you really want to know that in any armed forces, even the, almost ideologically so rigid as the North Korean ones, for example, just look up the Operation Moolah and ask yourself a question: how the United States obtained the MiG-15, which created a cultural and technological shock during the Korean War. And you will recognize that there are some idiots, and especially like this guy, whatever his name is, Russian helicopter pilot, which was brought up by mom only, who was evidently independent woman who thought that she knows better than anybody else. So there you get it. So, and that's the result of all. So, but let's not go through all those minutiae. In fact, I cannot even emphasize enough how unimportant it is in overall picture of the events, and especially after Mr. Kim Jong-un is now has been greeted by Mr. Putin at spaceport in Vostochny, but we'll talk about this later, maybe separately. But here is the thing which actually made me really, how to say it, satisfied, if you wish, yesterday. Before we go, and I will explain why I'm satisfied, here is the latest butcher's bill for today. As you can see yourself, on the 13th, we have 8,856 KIAs on the Ukrainian side, and then we have the issue of Mr. Putin speaking to the Far Eastern Economic Forum, who confirmed that throughout the so-called counteroffensive, armed forces of Ukraine lost 71,000 killed. So, I mean, yeah, I have to explain to you, and this is what I will be talking about today, that, for example, no people in Pentagon, CIA, or White House have any actually reference points or mental capacity to wrap their brains around it. And so let's start. And the reason I got satisfied, as I already stated yesterday, was the fact that actually it was a triple almost shot by people whom I know, and some of them are my friends like Garrett Nixon, that they started talking about, finally, about what we need to talk, and I've been talking about. In fact, you can read my latest book, which is already now almost 2 years old. It is about the psychological and psychiatric state of the United States elite and American elites, but not only American elites, also the Western elites. First, we had obviously Garland, who in his typical brilliant manner, just literally using the simplest terms, explained why the Ukraine off-ramp is closed for the United States, and he was talking about this complete delusion and psychiatric, not just psychological, psychiatric issue of the, for the American elites, that they are just absolutely people who are incapable of dealing with the reality. Then we have incomparable Michael Brenner talking to Nima of the Dialogue Works, and also he was talking yesterday about Nyakon's agenda and how basically we have the psychiatric issue. And he's mentioning, for example, that many in America still consider themselves as being born into the original virtue, and this, psychotic idea of the exceptionalism comes around and lives in Washington, D.C. I also suggest you to watch this. And of course, we have now the situation with Cy Hirsch, and I'm giving you the basically the translation of Hirsch piece from Real News, because it's on Substack. I don't have subscription of Substack. So, but Cy Hirsch today, and as you can see yourself, it's a machine translation of the Real News. He writes about that. He called the problem that could lead the United States to war with Russia. I certainly can appreciate what he is trying to say, albeit for all his magnificent work as the basically investigative journalist, I would say he still kind of has issues with strategy and operational art. Nonetheless, he in some sense is correct, warning again against the lines of the psychiatric issue, of the issue of the delusion. And here it is. The American journalist noted that White House confidence in success of Kyiv in the conflict in Moscow may be based on insanely optimistic reports from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. Well, what can I say? All these wonderful, videos and writing yesterday is kind of, finally gets to the point which I was trying to convey, and I have now people with definite, wherewithal bigger than mine, who begin to speak about it in an open manner, that we're looking at the, just literally psychiatric issue. We have the Psychiatric Ward, essentially, in Washington, D.C., and if that hasn't been enough, greatly admired by me, Alistair Crook also writes yesterday in Strategic Culture Foundation a wonderful piece about the geopolitics. And that's what he writes about the issue of the geopolitics as it was perceived by such, largely they are not really, never have been scholars. Mr. Kissinger, who is still alive, I don't know how he lives, and obviously late Mr. Brzezinski. And when Alistair Crook wrote about the issue of the geopolitics and Mackinder, he notes that it was Henry Kissinger, however, that gave Mackinder its celebrated twist. He who controls money controls the world, was to become the dollar and banking financialized hegemony. But, and here what Crook writes, but Kissinger, especially what really worth our attention, but Kissinger in this was wrong from the get-go. It always has been. He who has manufacturing capacity, raw materials, food, energy, human as well as fossil, and sound money can change the world. But Kissinger simply ignored those junk conditions and based the US instead in the creation of a global spiderweb of weaponized dollars. And this is the thing which I've been writing about, screaming about, talking about for many years, very many years. And at some point of time, as I already stated yesterday, and I constantly emphasize this issue, that I arrived at the conclusion that apart from having obviously they're really badly educated and very uncultured, American elites are extremely uncultured. They are extremely provincial, and those people who are, despite the fact that many people still say that like, oh yeah, he was born in New York and was touched by great culture. Great culture in what sense? I mean, New York is culturally, it's a second rate compared to, for example, Moscow, St. Petersburg, or even Milan. And so when you look at this in terms of high art, what do you see there? Nothing really. I mean, what? Guggenheim Gallery? Wow, big freaking deal. I mean, go to Hermitage and then feel yourself, complex of inferiority for the rest of your life. And that same goes for the most of the American cities, which do not produce high art. They do not produce a real serious culture of the serious level, unless, of course, one thinks that the hip hop or rap culture. And so when you look at this, and you have to understand that basically those people, I mean, those American leaders, what do they have? They have this, pseudo aristocratic attempts on the what have been happening actually with the especially American South, which allegedly many people who went, those pilgrims, so to speak, they have been having some kind of roots to British aristocracy. But we have to keep in mind those people have been moving here for very different reasons than just aristocratic aspirations. And when you look at this, there was never cultural milieu which came together and gave the sense of the real serious understanding of the high art, high culture, despite the fact that many of them, for example, if you look attentively at the even current Biden administration, people like Blinken, Jake Sullivan, they wear expensive clothes, they wear expensive watch, but this is not real culture. It is merely the shallow representation of the attempt of the school of pretense. Read about what school of pretense is in my latest book, of being related somehow to the high art, high culture, and high intellectual level. There is no high intellectual level. We know this now. And if these political elites have been absolutely, well, some people say malnourished, the American political elite are malcultured. And that same goes nowadays with the Western European political elites, because they are morons. If you look attentively at Annalena Baerbock, she's an imbecile. I mean, basically, she already discovered that there are 560 days in a year. She also now knows that you can turn 360 degrees and look at the opposite direction. So this is the type of people we have in the basically position of power and representing people. And when you look attentively at this, you begin to understand that, there was some warning signs about all that. And this is what I've been on the record for the last 10 years, constantly stressing this. And that gets us to the Mr. Hofstadter in 1963. And he wrote in his wonderful treatise, I mean, not everything I agree with it, but look what he wrote in 1963 in his Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. The complexity of modern life has steadily whittled away the functions of the ordinary citizen can intelligently and comprehendingly perform for himself. In the original American populistic dream, the omnicompetence of the common man was fundamental and indispensable. It was believed that he could, without much special preparation, pursue the professions and run the government. Today he knows that he cannot even make his breakfast without using devices more or less mysterious to him, which expertise have put at his disposal. And when he sits down to breakfast and looks at his morning newspaper, he reads about a whole range of vital and intricate issues and acknowledges, if he is a candid with himself, that he has not acquired competence to judge most of them. This is genius, prescient view of the not just simple people, which, by the way, applies across the board, not only in the United States. It applies also for the lay people in, say, in Russia, in Europe, and especially when you look attentively at how the Western system of the public educations have been completely, basically destroyed. This Hofstadter's quip applies dramatically well, not only to them, but it applies to the elites. And this is when we go back to this psychiatric issue. If you take all those Jake Sullivans, all those Blinkens, all those Lord Austins, all those many people, those American generals, and that's the thing which I had to come up basically to this conclusion, and I was terrified myself that, oh my God, they are really that incompetent. They will not be able to run a real serious combined arms operation. They don't even know how. And this comes to the point which I was making for a long time and which applies completely today, especially when you look at the butcher's bill. For example, when you look at the inability of the armed forces of Ukraine, and it's actually direct Pentagon, British and American generals to conduct anything sensible in terms of the military science, in terms of the military art, it becomes clear. Yes, the question is they do not understand how things work, because it's 21st century. It is very, very complex. And I've been on record before that, and you can take a look at my previous video where I talk about the parameters, and the people who still believe that, you can learn something from the Gulf War. What can you possibly learn? Except for the, technical honing a little bit of your weapon systems. That's about it. It's a range. It's free for all. There was no real military science applied. There was basically this plan. Just let's pre-deploy, let's run over the army, which wasn't army in a traditional sense. And when you look at this, when you look at those old PhDs in political science, in sociology, in journalism, in communications, and even the law, you look at this, despite the fact that law is a crucial skill and you need it, but when you look at this, they, like what is described by Hofstadter in 1963, they are not really intellectuals. They don't understand how things work. And guess what? I'm a record. I write books. The fourth one is being written right now. Military science is extremely complex. It is extremely complex, and especially complex is the operational art. Why it is art, it's a whole other story. I'm not talking about operations. Operations are hard science, and they require a lot of math, a lot of physics. But operational art is different. It is art indeed. And I will be expanding on this probably later. But the point is that when you begin to look at this and you begin to also put together what, for example, I demonstrated to you in terms of wonderful people like Michael Brenner or Garland or, other people like Cy Hirsch, you look at people who really do not know. They do not understand. They have no idea. They have no actual any touch with the reality because they don't have toolkit, because it's too complex. And let me tell you, if anybody tells me that military engineering profession, for example, on the weapon system integration, and especially especially bulk of the military sciences which come from the basic ability to march and then develop the combat cohesion of the unit to very complex issue of the command control, communications and computers and ISR, and some degree in political science. Sorry people, this is not even comparable. You cannot even compare it. It's just one requires no abilities, no academic capability and intellectual capability whatsoever. The other requires a very serious effort and a very serious commitment in your life and in your intellectual pursuits to even accomplish. And that's the thing which many people still cannot understand, and many people do not want to accept it, for example, because if you look attentively at people who run, for example, modern day America, most of them, not all, there are some exceptions, of course, which, by the way, merely underscore the rule. When you look at those people, they are those Hofstadter people who won't know what they are dealing with when they turn on the toaster, let alone when they look at the weapon systems and when they look at the operational art and strategies. And we are talking about when, as always the case with people who are primitive, who have a very limited toolkit, who are faced with something which is so complex, which is so sophisticated, they have their basically cognitive dissonance, and as Cy Hirsch points out, they need to live in this delusion. You need the American intelligence to provide those insanely optimistic things because they cannot handle them. They don't have the toolkit, they don't have moral toolkit, and they don't have intellectual one. Get me any neocon, including from the so-called Institute for Study of War, the Kagans, the Scheister organization, which runs this pseudo-academic think tank. Or let me talk to anybody from the RAND. They have no clue. Much of them are political scientists, and those generals who go in there, they're just merely to, provide anything, any justification for whatever is the cash flow in their pockets. And you have this absolute incredible lack of expertise and incompetence. And then everybody asks each other, what happened to the country? Well, what happened to the country is what we have today. And this we're gonna get much worse because before it gets any better. And I usually do not like to comment on the future of the United States in such a way, but I have to admit that we are living at the final burial of this present iteration of the United States. If there will be a United States, which survives more or less intact as the geographic and political entity in the nearest 5 years, it will be different United States. There will be no more this, liberty, democracy, and things of that nature. It will be a very unhappy country, which it already is, but it will be much more unhappy. And if you want to learn how it is unhappy and how it is going to be, get to my friend James Howard Kunstler. He is an outstanding American writer, and he has this incredible vernacular to explain to you what it's going to be and how the United States disintegrates as we speak now. And that's the reason which, for example, if you go in today's news and you read what Mr. Kim Jong-un wrote in the guest book at the Vostochny spaceport or Cosmodrome today, he talks about that the United States is done. It's smoking aside, just look at it. It's in there. And this record is photographed and for you to see. And there is a translation for this. And when, getting these things together, you suddenly have the situation that indeed those people, most of them, they won't be able to mow the lawn at my house. And I'm talking about not just, some kind of the middle level. Paradoxically, some people in the middle level bureaucracy, they still retain some reasonable skills. But when you look at the top, these people don't know what they're doing. And when Cy Hirsch warns about the possibility of such a war, well, there could be intent, there could be people who would like to start this war precisely because they do not understand what they're dealing with. And it comes across and it goes both to White House, the administration of Biden, and of course it goes to Pentagon. There are still many American officers and generals who think that they are, the greatest thing ever. And then when you begin to ask them very specific, concrete, tactical, operational, strategic questions, they will not be able to answer it. And as I already stated, as was shown in the last video, even parameters begins to kind of, tacitly admit, so to speak, and sort of watching that, yeah, we're gonna get our ass kicked. Well, of course you would. But the point is that even there, if you look attentively today at the basically this madhouse with people who have some psychiatric disorders, not psychological, psychiatric, those people are either schizophrenic or there's something wrong with them. When you look attentively even at this, and this is the Spiegel, and then suddenly Spiegel, and that basically German journalists are the lower or the lowest. They are together, occupy the sewer together with the British journalists, with American not being far away from that. Even Spiegel suddenly yesterday noticed that Deutschland actually is importing the huge number or huge volume of Russian oil through India. Well, what do you expect? Even when you have such morons and imbeciles as Mr. Bach, who is the big honcho actually, Olaf Scholz is pathetic figure, useless cock, so just remove him from your memory or from your consideration. This is Mr. Bach, who has degree in philosophy, who runs, or rather continues to destroy German economy, but suddenly even Germans, they increase the volume of the Russian oil, which is resold by India with a good markup for Indians, good for them, 12 times. But even these creeps, they do understand that actually you cannot exist without energy. Wow! It used to be that Germany was making a tremendous contribution to physics. My gosh, look at the German scientists who, contributed so much to physics. And then suddenly they forgot about the physics, they forgot about what energy is and how the modern economies operate, and then suddenly we have this situation, they're still buying Russian oil. Of course they do. They have no option. They have no choice. And when you look at this, not only just Germany, you look across the board. And you look across the board, for example, of the wet dreams. And even if you go to the same Parameters magazine, which talks about the, increased number of sophistication of the, what is called 7C. It is the, what 7C? It is the way they want to see basically themselves in Arctic. You see, they define one of the people from Wilson Center who also wrote the piece on in the in Parameters, this 7C, climate, commodities, commerce, connectivity, communities, cooperation, competition. But then you have to ask yourself a question, and how do you want to be present there when you literally have the situation that even they admit that in their of concern to most Arctic nations is the increased number and sophistication of new and refurbished Russian and Soviet era military bases, coupled with a more robust tempo and varying designs of training schemes, as well as publicly stated military and security aspirations. Well, I have news for those people. You cannot do anything because you need to have something which, for example, the United States doesn't have. You need to have the extremely advanced icebreaker building industry. You have to have the whole Arctic design for the weapon systems, and you have to have the ability to live there, what Russians did for many years, for many decades. And yet they still pretend that it matters somehow that the United States will do something, if just doing this something in Alaska. I cannot even explain to you the abyss which separates Russian capabilities in Arctic and American ones. And the same goes for the Western ones. And when you look at this, are those people normal? Are they capable even to communicate anything in the normal language, like, for example, Mr. Alistair Crook writes, or Mr. Brenner speak, or Garland Nixon speak in normal human language, explaining things and giving them proper definitions, proper designations that people understand? No. That is why we have a joke. We have Pentagonese language. You have State Departmentese language. These are people who talk a lot and produce absolutely nothing of value. They create all those whiteboard theories without having any understanding of whatever they are talking about. And it came down to such a basically level right now that while we may say that Russia will continue, for example, to sell through their middlemen like India, to Western Europe, people have to understand Russia doesn't do it for their how to put it, humanitarian reasons or cultural ones. No, Russia does it for money, and as you might expect, Russians do not want to have the third world crap hole, which is politically completely unstable, having on its western borders. Ukraine is enough. Now, can you imagine if you have the, which is already happening, people who have half brain in their heads, they speak about it openly. For example, the industrialization of Germany, the same goes for the European continent as a whole, and then we have the complete demographic. It's just, there are no words to describe what is going on. Europe is done. It's over. So, but Russia doesn't want to have this basically place, sunk in the bloodshed and some kind of civil war and hostilities. Why do you need basically political instability on one of your borders? And that is why Russia will continue to maintain them, at least something that they not gonna start killing each other. Although who knows, we'll see. Russia may change its views on this whole situation altogether. But even that, you can see now that Mr. Medvedev, who is hugely important and hugely powerful man in Russia, he already stated that Moscow should suspend diplomatic relations with European Union, which I agree actually. And as he mockingly praised what he described as straightforward and honest Brussels bosses. Directly and without beating around the bush, they told all Russians, we see you as second-rate people. And I agree with him. Russia should stop any kind of diplomatic relations with the EU. In fact, this is not just EU bosses. The European population is a completely brainwashed. It's a bunch of those laymen from Hofstadter. They do not even understand what is happening. They will understand when they will start losing their houses, when they will go hungry. Many of them are already going. And so this is what is the fate of Europe. And the United States played a key role in that too. So, and when you begin to look at this and say, my God, how did this happen? Well, it has happened for a simple reason, of which my video was today. And this is what Mr. Garland Nixon, Michael Brenner, Cy Hirsch, Alistair Crook, and others, many others, real intellectuals speak about now for years, and especially with the start of special military operations. My God, those people are morons. Literally, and every single of them. They do not understand how to run, 7-Eleven shop, let alone the countries the scale of the United States or the European Union. And when you look at that, yeah, they are not intellectuals, they never have been. But that gets us to the overall Western degree meals, all those so-called Oxfords and Harvards, much of which, with the exception of the medical and STEM schools, have to be basically dissolved. It's a bunch of the cribs there who are brainwashed population, providing no scientific value whatsoever. And that is why we have those people who go into the real world, suddenly encounter the reality, and they cannot handle it. And as the result, they behave like psychiatrically damaged items. They get inside their echo chambers and insulate themselves from the reality. And that is why they're dangerous. But what can I say? Russian strategy is very simple. Russia will outweight them. Very simple. Outlast them, because it's very clear Russians doing okay. Russia is doing okay militarily. Economically, it's booming. And essentially, well, maybe Russia will get what everybody thinks about now, that at some point of time, the new generation will come. People who can reason, and you can reason with them, and then we will settle something in this world. But for now, we observe the collapse of the Western civilization due to imbecility and serious psychiatric disorders. And this was my message for you today, guys. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, support me, please, on the Patreon or buy me a coffee and two. And this will be it for today. Have the nice rest of the week. Bye-bye.